And you have the Ayala economy.
I'm going to give Hiro a chance to react to this question. What measure other than the GDP can we have so that we have something to hold on to and tell government, look, you have a skewed measure, we have a better measure here. Yeah.
Well, it takes, again, government funding to get an accurate read. I mean, the former head of NEDA himself said, Padaranga even said, our definition of employment in this country is different from the standards used in other countries. That means that we count people who are really unemployed. Because the definition of employment means that you are a full-fledged, full-time...
part of the labor force with...
again, the labor market, etc. But we are a developing economy. Okay, the agricultural sector is backward. The industrial sector has been mismatched with the export orientation, etc. Here you have a country that produces semicon electrical products. And yet, we cannot produce onions and garlics competitively.
Well, I keep telling Hiro here that I'm also buying smuggled maybe, but clearly imported butong pakwan. So,
minsan you have no choice. You go to the market, you know, it's not local garlic, but wala na eh.
Yung garlic is higher in my scale of productivity pa. But butong pakwan,
you know,
60% of our money is imported.
60%
so, like I said,
is imported,
you know, it's getting to be so difficult
Aren't
to
we
track.
designed to be just importers? Because I can see in the boardrooms of IMF and World Bank, they say, hey, we gave you the OFW market. You'll be happy with that. Don't produce anything because we have to recycle the dollars that you're earning back to the...
Alam mo, that's awful. This morning, I was talking to one of our children's organizations. They were telling us about, they did a shoot among daycare centers.
Yes,
so, typical question, ano mga pangarap nyo, paglaki nyo? Striking, there were people saying, paglaki ko, gusto ko magtrabaho sa Hong Kong tulad ng tatay ko. Paglaki ko, gusto kaming domestic sa Saudi tulad ng nanay ko. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, those kinds of statements would have been normal. But because of this crazy OFW phenomenon, culturally, it's become normal to go abroad. It's become normal to be separated from your family.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's
I have a timely question. I just wrote an article for our weekly opinion. And I picked up, I've been studying currency and the currency war. And I have evidence from statements of American financial, economic officials that they really intend to devalue the U.S. strategically by 33%. There are statements to that effect.
What's China going to do? What's China going to do?
What's China going to do? But more important, what will the OFW do if they're earning an average, let's say, of $300, you know, i-average mo yung high-end and low-end of OFW workers natin, baka $300-400 na. And you lose 30% of what the exchange rate that has already lost 30% from 2004's exchange rate of 56 to the dollar. I have OFWs already complaining today. But if it goes down further than 30%, 30% more, which Hiro is questioning whether it can really go down further 30%.
You have to understand that when you start to say, oh, the U.S. is going to devalue, but the other countries basically will react to it and they will prevent it as far as their own economy is concerned.
Brazil in 2009 imposed 2% tax on hot money,
all this talk,
etc. But the Philippines, up to today, I just studied it, the central bank is just mulling the some tightening of the non-deliverable forwards. Only today.
The IMF have already given the signal to their BSP, our BSP. It's okay for you to put in capital controls. So all of a sudden, they announced that, okay, we will put a waiting period. Okay? But hello, if you look at the history of the currency of the world, okay, there are always changes dependent on the geopolitical economy of the world. British Empire, American Empire, and now you have a challenger because of the economic might that is coming up of China. But the Chinese know also that it is foolhardy to internationalize their currency.
Well, that's a new level of discussion which I do not want to go into yet. My question is still, there is an ongoing devaluation or at least depreciation of the US dollar today.
Against whom?
Against the peso.
No, again,
That's the peso versus the dollar, not so much the dollar against the peso.
Against the peso.
you have to understand that, when you say that the U.S. would like to devalue, they would like to devalue against the primary competitors,
Which is
the EU,
yeah.
Japan.
But we're collateral damage.
But again, our economy basically, the culture of the Philippines was skewed, where we love to keep dollars and love to keep the peso strong against the dollars because we have an import appetite.
Yeah, I want to define the problem. The problem is OFWs are earning $300-400 on the average.
Yeah.
If the value still goes down of their exchange value of peso to dollar, what is in store in the future?
Well, I think that's true, but the dynamic, I think, for the strengthening, quote-unquote, of the peso, it's more internal rather than for the USA. It's, good propaganda, lots of road shows, money coming in, hot money coming in, driving up the stock market. It's actually all very artificial. I mean, from our perspective,
but
it's internal
the impact is real for Filipino dollar earners. First of all, yung so-called strengthening of the peso is such a misnomer. Because as far as the dollar earner is concerned, Filipino dollar earner, is losing exchange value.
It is inflationary for the dollar earner, which is precisely because the U.S.
You're confusing me more when you say inflationary for the dollar,
basically
Filipino dollar.
Because he earns.
No. It's easier for him to understand that he is losing the number of pesos in exchange for the dollar now.
Ang gastos niya. Bakit?
Mas maliit ang kita niya as a dollar
because
earner.
his dollars actually buy less.
Precisely, that's
pesos.
the point. That's the
And
bottom line.
that is inflationary.
So yun ang that's the point I'm trying to pursue because that will have real impact on the economy. Exporters will lose the number of peso in exchange for a number of peso in exchange for dollars. BPOs will lose and OFWs families will lose. Ano ang impact nito in the coming 5 years, for example? To be very specific, Sunny, then to zero. You think that the relative to the peso, the devaluation of the dollar will continue?
At least, no one can predict what's going to happen in 2 years, 3 years' time. But the way things are going right now, if you look at the fundamentals are the Philippines remains very dependent on dollars from abroad, care for OFWs. Right now, the government's in a high-gear propaganda drive that we're doing very well. So they've got the 7.1 growth in their pocket. They claim they've got investment-grade credit rating upgrades coming up. They've got this, nice numbers for the stock market. In the near term, those are all signs that foreign capital looking for a place to park their funds for maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Right now, the Philippines looks good for that. So at the very least, we can say, we can't predict the direction, but the factors are there in terms of dollars coming in. At least for the coming year, the dollars will keep coming in. In terms of our capacity to actually produce stuff to sell abroad, again, another wild card. If things go haywire in Europe or in the United States, all bets are off. I mean, that will really throw things up. So maybe ask us personally, we were pretty sure, as far as we can tell, the conditions are there for continued strengthening of the dollar. Unfortunately, conditions are there
for the continuous weakening of the dollar.
Strengthening of the peso. Which also means conditions are there for continuous worsening of the income of overseas workers in the Philippines.
That's why this term strengthening of the peso is such a dilemma. I want to change that, but anyway, let's get Hero's response.
Well, judging from the reactions of some of our mainstream free market fundamentalist economists now, they are all banging the warning drums, pointing to the revaluing of the
I think that's
peso.
a better term, revaluing of the peso.
Instead of devaluing, they're calling for the revaluing of the Philippine peso as a danger to the Philippine economy. And they would prefer, and this is where most people don't realize, a complete shift saying that the government must move to undervalue the Philippine peso.
Okay, we're going to move fast. The Philippine Exporters Confederation has called for a 42.50 to the dollar exchange rate. I suppose that means pegging it at that rate. What is the best? I get questions from my radio listeners. By the way, over DWAD 1098 AM. So you get a financial and economic discussion 5 to 6 every afternoon, Tuesday to Friday. I mentioned that not because I'm plugging, but because it's an opportunity to discuss these issues for the masa. So 42.50 centavos for the exporters. So I get questions like, is it better to have a weakening peso or a strengthening peso? People are confused. But we have what the exporters saying, peg it somewhere. So we know how we can plan our businesses, right? What do you think? Any reaction? 42.50, 45?
Well, again, we do not have an institutional framework in government, basically, that plans monetary policy, of which foreign exchange policy is critical.
Okay, that's the reaction from Hero. I'll get back to that. What's your reaction to that question?
I'd even go more basic. The problem is our OFWs are in a difficult situation because the government put them there. They've been put in a position where they have to depend on work abroad and dollars sent back home. So actually, unfortunately, I think if the exchange rate is going to be managed, if there's going to be a rational exchange rate policy, I think it's a secondary consideration. It should be, strategically, a secondary consideration what's good for our OFWs or not. Because they shouldn't be there in the first place.
Yeah,
the bigger question is, what kind of exchange rate policy, how do we manage our Forex to be able to encourage domestic industry?
We have 5 minutes to the end. Ang bilis naman. Trying to, well, it's of course the right thing to do to bring back the OFWs. But as Hero said, we do not have the...
The thing is, if we keep the OFWs there, because people are so desperate for work to go abroad, actually that's also tying our hands. So the thing is, through sheer quantity of OFWs abroad, and especially sheer quantity of overseas Filipino families here, the government's actually tying its hands in terms of exchange rate policy. Like your callers in the AM radio station, they're calling because they're feeling it. But that's where the problem lies. Precisely because the stopgap measures become institutionalized. By doing that, the government's actually losing its control over Forex policy by introducing a parameter that should not be there to begin with.
Okay, Hero.
Well, like I said, the failure of succeeding governments or the failure of the Philippine state in having an overall coordinated developmental policy, agri, industry, etc., which Forex policy is critical because, you know, the world economy is ruled by major nations. Right now, you have the declining American empire. The dollar is still the currency of choice. It has become the premier international currency by reason of history. And the U.S. has that exorbitant privilege of printing as many dollars as it wants, basically due to the subnormal conditions in their economy. And the whole world is reeling from it.
We have our last 3 minutes, and I'm more confused than clarified after the discussion. I'm sure many in the audience too. Before the show started, Hero seemed to have thrown up his hands and says, we don't have a state, and nobody seems to be interested in strengthening the state so that then the economic planning will follow. And so it seems that when we look at ASEAN, everybody has a workable state. Everybody seems to be moving forward while we have now to be come to the level of Cambodia. So who's going to establish a state?
I have a one-liner for that. We have a state. The state's just not working for Filipinos. Like, I'm sure that wasn't a slip. The IMF's central bank, that's true. I think the bottom line is we do have a state. It's a workable state, but it's not working for Filipinos. I think a lot of the complaining about the Philippines, a failed state, etc., well, we have to accept that's not true. There is a state there, it's functioning, it can be strengthened, it can be made more democratic, but the biggest problem right now is not the absence of a state. The biggest problem is we have a state serving the interests of foreigners, not Filipinos.
And serving the interests of the domestic oligarchs.
Who are partnered with foreign capital, yes.
And they seem to be in control for the next foreseeable future, the next elections that are coming.
Well, the commercial interest of this country has always been tied to, again, his historical. Okay, they basically furthered themselves because of their ties to the Spanish colonizers and then to the Americans, and they became the agents, suppliers of resources, etc. That continues till today. So basically, the commercial interest and banking interest, basically, of this country has integrated itself with the global economy run by the British, the Americans. And now there is a shift
So,
in the global economy. So,
so wala pang pag-asa na magkakaroon ng isang totoo at tunay na maka-Pilipino na liderato ng state na tinatawag natin. It's not in the foreseeable future.
Sige.
The candidates of the establishment and the so-called opposition, sila Binay, do not have a different philosophy from the existing operation of the state.
They're sharing candidates and you have two coalitions
So,
with
pareho pa
common
rin.
candidates.
Pareho pa rin. Last 60 seconds.
well, again, it boils down to essentially sovereignty. You're talking about currency wars, and the reason why there is this term currency wars and there is economic pushing and pulling is because countries that are developing, etc., 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 realize that monetary policy is one of the most essential ingredients of political
Okay,
sovereignty.
that is the essential really. Akala ng Pilipino yung eleksyon ng essential. No, it is our
may
final word.
quick
30
reminder.
seconds. Sige.
2013 is the 150th birth anniversary of Andres Bonifacio. He wanted to struggle against Spain. He wanted to create an independent, sovereign Philippines. 150 years later, it's a good reminder for us. The question is, do we ask the government to be nice? Do we ask the government to suddenly not follow the foreign capital, IMF, World Bank? No, that's not going to happen. We have to demand it. Filipinos have to work for it. It's not going to be handed on a silver platter. Boni 150, let's celebrate the 150th anniversary.
I hope it doesn't take another 150 years. Okay, wala tayong oras. Thank you very much. Have a happy weekend. It's happy holidays very soon.
Yeah, it's the holidays.
We will smile.